today? Okay, well, I'm going to look at something from the Netherlands, which is actually a painting from Frans van Mieris that was stolen from the Art Gallery of New South Wales. So let's start. Okay. Well, the date June 10, 2012 marked 5 years since the 17th century Dutch painting, a Cavalier self-portrait, was discovered missing from the Art Gallery of New South Wales, and it's still not been recovered. The artist who created the work, as I just mentioned, Frans van Mieris, may not be such a familiar name, but he was part of that era of art history known as the Dutch Golden Age and was a contemporary of Rembrandt and just as popular in his day. Furthermore, Van Mieris has been singled out as a major factor in the refinement of Dutch genre painting. Still, despite his unquestioned pedigree, it can be safe to say that that the name Frans van Mieris didn't immediately spring to mind when the phrase Old Dutch Master was bandied about. That all changed, however, when a Cavalier was stolen in June 2007. His name was back in the spotlight, but for all the wrong reasons. His painting was now part of a growing catalogue of stolen works, and the headlines at the time reflected this. However, despite this initial attention, within a year, the investigation into the theft was suspended owing to no new leads. And while the case remains technically open, the theft appears to have slipped away from the spotlight and the headlines, apart from still remaining as an entry in the FBI's top 10 list of art crimes. Now, knowing all this, I did still have a sense of anticipation as the 5th anniversary of the theft approached. Perhaps the media would run a story on the theft and generate some much-needed attention. After all, this was an important piece, which had been stolen from one of the premier cultural institutions in the country, and it was still missing. Well, about 2 weeks before that anniversary, an article did appear about the theft. The Sydney Morning Herald ran a story on it, but it was not the headline I had been hoping for. According to the article, the police and gallery had given up searching for the painting. The investigation, as I alluded to earlier, had been suspended in June 2008 because, to quote from the article, police had exhausted all avenues of investigation. The Herald's article only served to evoke an even greater sense of futility in this case. A Cavalier is out there somewhere, but no one, it seems, is proactively engaged in looking for it anymore. This led me to contemplate what can be done to generate more attention for unsolved art thefts and therefore enable, hopefully, the potential to generate new leads. So bearing that in mind, this afternoon I will be exploring the utilisation of public awareness campaigns as a possible strategy to assist law enforcement agencies in recovering stolen artwork. I will be presenting a couple of examples to see how these could be adapted for use in the unsolved case of a Cavalier, but really the main goal for my presentation is simply to put a few ideas out there, generate some discussion where you can apply your expertise and experience, more than mine, and determine whether these ideas are viable or not. It would be safe to say, though, that this whole presentation is underpinned by one fundamental question, and that is, at what point do you give up searching for a stolen artwork? Even knowing how stretched policing resources can be and the different priorities that exist within law enforcement agencies, as we've heard a bit about this afternoon, compounded by the ongoing reality that Australia lacks a specialised art crime unit, it is worth considering if there are strategies to help in the recovery of stolen art, strategies which by their makeup can be adopted by law enforcement agencies within their existing work environment. In terms of the examples I will be sharing with you today, I didn't have to wait long or look far to find them. Indeed, the first one popped up around the time of the 5th anniversary of the Cavalier's theft, where media reports over in the US were announcing that the federal government there via the FBI and the US Attorney's Office were considering mounting an awareness campaign to solicit information from the public about another art theft, the 1990 robbery at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. And authorities were hoping to reintroduce the public to the 13 pieces that had been stolen in that robbery. Well, this well-known case has regularly been reported on, unlike a Cavalier, so it's regularly stayed in the spotlight, and understandably so when one considers that the roll call of purloined artworks lists Rembrandt, Vermeer, Manet and Degas amongst the artists, and the collective value of the 13 works stolen is estimated to be somewhere between $300 to $500 million. Well, the media reports explained that this latest effort to find these stolen works was actually the result of a similar public awareness campaign, which was credited with last year's apprehension of alleged Boston crime boss, James Whitey Bulger, who's in his 80s. He had eluded US authorities for 16 years and was himself a long-touted suspect in the Gardner Museum robbery, although it now appears unlikely he was involved. We're not sure yet. We haven't had he hasn't fully come to court about his, they're more worried about his connection to 19 murders, let alone just the robbery. So what sort of strategies were employed which led to the capture of James Whitey Bulger and which now has the FBI contemplating doing something similar for the Gardner robbery? And could similar strategies be applied in the case of the Cavalier? Well, when it came to devising a public awareness campaign, the FBI's focus was not on James Whitey Bulger, but on his partner, Catherine Gregg, who had gone on the run with him. Now, if I start to smile during this, you'll understand in a moment, because sometimes they say truth is stranger than fiction. It's also funnier than fiction sometimes. Well, the authorities knew that Gregg would likely be the more social of the two, as she had particular lifestyle choices that necessitated being out in public on a regular basis. Firstly, she had an obsession with dental hygiene. She apparently made monthly visits to the dentist to get her teeth cleaned. So this all makes sense, just I'll keep going. Secondly, Gregg had a fondness for frequenting beauty salons and indulging in cosmetic surgery. And thirdly, she loved dogs. So it was possible she had one for a pet and would be out and about taking her for walks. So when considering all this interesting information, the FBI took a twofold approach. They sent notices about Gregg to dental associations, and they also created a 30-second public service announcement, which was aired during television programs that attracted a specific audience demographic which matched Gregg's personal attributes. So basically, TV shows watched by women aged in their 50s and 60s. Well, the public service announcement showed various images of Gregg, including one of her walking a dog, and opened with these words: "There is someone in the United States or elsewhere in the world who knows Catherine Gregg as a neighbour, friend or co-worker." Now, this twofold approach used by the FBI illustrates a strategy which could possibly be adopted to generate greater awareness about the theft of the Cavalier. And that is the strategy of targeting a specific characteristic about the crime, or, as was the case with Bulger and Gregg, targeting specific characteristics about the criminals themselves, and then building a public awareness campaign around those elements. Obviously, with the theft of a Cavalier, we don't know who the thief, or possibly thieves, are, but there are specific characteristics which could form the basis for an awareness campaign. One example to consider is the type of screw used by the gallery to display the painting. According to the private investigator who worked the case, Michael Marr, the type of screw used was neither the commonly available flathead nor Phillips head screw, as some media reports had incorrectly suggested at the time, but rather it was a specialty screw which would require the appropriate specialised screwdriver to remove the 4 screws that held the painting in place. So following on from this, perhaps notices about the theft of the Cavalier, along with an image of the work, could be placed in art supply stores that stock these specialised screws and tools, or even on their websites. As Mara explained, the thief would have needed prior knowledge of how the painting was displayed in order to determine how to best remove it, and so they, or somebody who knows them, may possibly frequent such stores. The notices would send a message that the theft has not been forgotten, and maybe even prompt someone to come forward with information. Now, this may or may not be a viable strategy, but it's an exercise in illustrating how a public awareness campaign can be centred on a specific feature of the crime, which can enable a more targeted and streamlined approach rather than throwing the net wide and using up resources that just aren't there. It should be noted, though, that the James Whitey Bulger case did involve a $2 million reward, which incidentally was claimed by the woman who recognised Catherine Gregg from those public service announcements and then let the authorities know. The Gardner case also involves a reward of $5 million. Now, certainly we know there are arguments both for and against the offering of rewards, with the more dominant view being that they really just encourage more thefts. But with the Cavalier being a public asset and so the property of the New South Wales state government, a reward isn't an option here. Again, Michael Marr advised me that government policy does not sanction the issuing of rewards in matters such as this. So would it be possible to engage the public in an awareness campaign without that incentive of a reward? Perhaps the second example I want to share with you will answer that question. Well, this next example, like the first one, also emerged days after the anniversary of the Cavalier's theft, and from an unexpected quarter too. As part of my research into a Cavalier's disappearance for my honours studies, I was examining the Gardner Museum robbery to enable the preparation of a comparative analysis. And part of this research involved contacting the Director of Security at the Gardner Museum, Anthony Amore. Now, his role at the Gardner also entails investigating that 1990 robbery. And one of the strategies he applies is to compile a database of other art thefts, so he can gain knowledge and insight on the different methods used by thieves. So consequently, he had also read that article which had explained that they'd given up searching for Cavalier. Well, imagine my surprise when talking to him, he advises me that he had set up a website not long after to help recover a Cavalier. He was so sort of frustrated and moved by the fact people had given up. So a painting disappears in Sydney and someone in Boston sets up a website to find it. But of course, geographical distances can now be easily navigated with the internet, and the internet, along with the many social media networks spawned from it, provides scope for implementing simple, cost-effective public awareness campaigns, which have the potential to reach a huge audience. One only has to see how readily all sectors of society have taken up. I mean, even the Queen and the Pope have Facebook pages, come on. Have taken up social media platforms such as Facebook and Twitter as proof of their reach. As we all would be aware, there's been a lot of recent negative attention focused on the trolls who infiltrate social media networks. Well, I don't want to talk about trolling, I want to talk about trawling, that is trawling the internet for stolen art. Bit corny, but I just threw it in there. On the website he set up, Anthony Amore refers to crowdsourcing information, that is, interested people and agencies get involved with the project because they want to. And that circle of people and agencies is limited only by the extent of their own connections. I think that Amore's approach in setting up a website of this nature points to how the internet has enormous potential to engage the public's help in the quest to solve an art theft, even without the monetary incentive of a reward. The proliferation of television programs, just open up your guide, TV guide, both fictional and real life that have a policing and forensics focus, illustrates how much people love a good whodunit. So a public awareness campaign incorporating social media platforms can tap into that insatiable curiosity and allow the public access to particular aspects of a case. We see this happening now where law enforcement agencies use their Facebook page, for example, to put out alerts about missing persons and other crimes, alerts which Facebook users then share with their list of friends. And while there are individuals and organisations with an interest in art crime who already use their social media platforms to publicise art thefts as they hit the headlines, this is still a strategy, I believe, that has not been fully exhausted in its application. And once again, applying this type of strategy is about ensuring the missing artworks are not forgotten, but instead kept in the public's consciousness. And while admittedly it also has the potential, as we know with most of these things, to attract misguided individuals offering false information or espousing their favourite conspiracy theories, or dare I say trolls, someone out there may have a vital piece of information which could potentially lead to a breakthrough in the case. It can be very much like a virtual game of Cluedo. And there's a lot to be said for the sense of validation and satisfaction people gain from being part of an online community, particularly when they are working collectively on the same goal. Stolen art has a low recovery rate, and when one considers how artworks act as markers of history, markers of time, each piece that goes missing leaves an irreplaceable gap in history. But there is also an interesting statistic about stolen art, which is especially true of old masterpieces, such as the Cavalier. They are either recovered relatively recently after the theft or a generation later. And that was certainly the case with another Frans van Mieris painting, Man at a Window Smoking a Pipe. I love that title, it's so abstract, isn't it? This piece was one of 4 paintings recovered in 1998 in Florida of all places, 30 years after being stolen from Romania's Brukenthal National Museum back in 1968. And given that statistics also show there is a higher recovery rate for stolen masterpieces, it is arguably never too late to mount a targeted public awareness campaign to find them. So this afternoon I've tried to offer a couple of strategies for how these campaigns might work in practice, which I hope will stimulate further strategies which may not have been fully canvassed before. So to conclude, I refer back to that question I had asked earlier. At what point do you give up searching for a stolen artwork? The right answer, the ideal answer, should be you give up searching once you've found it. That's what we'd like. Thank you.